Hey, welcome guys. Today we're going to dive into some 48th scale Tamiya with their Firefly. Now, I have yet to build any 48th scale armor from Tamiya. I have built, obviously, some aircraft. I've also done like the little British utility car that comes with, I think it was the de Havilland Mosquito. Done a couple 48th scale Tamiya things. One of their German supply trucks, but never a piece of armor. I really wanted to do a Firefly, pretty simply because I'm really into British armor and love a Firefly, but it was kind of difficult to find a kit that I wanted to build. I primarily build in 35th scale, but here we are, we found this. And without further ado, let's flip it over and let's see how this compares to, you know, a 35th scale kit. And if it holds up.
All right, so Tamiya's 48th scale British Sherman IC Firefly. So this is a 2006 kit from Tamiya, of course. They did 3 in 1 year, all brand new toolings. It started with a M4 Sherman early production. They also then did a M4A1 and then finally this IC Firefly. The reason they did that, as I would imagine, is that's really where the Firefly came from. Britain had, during the Lend-Lease era, a big stockpile of Shermans that were just getting knocked out against these Tigers and these superior German tanks. So to counter the weaknesses of the Shermans, especially the early Shermans like the M4A1, Britain, as you can see on the front of this tank and on the side, welded on additional armor plating. And then they included this 17-pound gun. That was really the first upgrade of the Sherman. It's really one of my favorite iterations of the Sherman, and it made great use of the stock that they had. So I think that's why Tamiya included it with their early releases. It makes a lot of sense that a lot of the parts would be the same, except, a couple upgraded in this case. Taking a look at the box, we get a die cast hull that we'll look at in a second, as well as a picture of the finished model. And if you watch my Zvezda Soviet, can't say that, artillery tractor review, I love that. As the buyer and the builder of these kits, I want to see the finished product. I want to get excited about what's going to be on my shelf. And I think that's a huge help. Really simple thing, but anyways, big fan. Tamiya instructions, as you see here, very few colors needed. Nothing out of the ordinary. Fold-out instructions. I would like a booklet, personally, be a little bit smaller, but anyways. The only really extra tool that you need here is CA glue or super glue. Maybe a little screwdriver to attach the bottom, to the upper hull, but you are working with a metal lower hull that we'll take a look at in a second. But we get really basic marking options. I will be going with the white camouflage barrel. Kind of confused German tankers from being able to distinguish and target the Firefly. It made the barrel look shorter, like the 75 millimeter. So I really like that. Anyways, jumping into the contents of the box, we have our die cast hull, which I really like the weight. It's going to weigh more than a 35th scale kit. But, lack of detail here. It won't really be seen, and we'll talk about why it doesn't matter towards the end of this review here. But the plastic looks 1,000 times better than the die-cast hull. It's the lower hull. I'm not going to harp on it too long, but it is definitely an area where there is just, it's almost absent of detail. The upper hull, very crisp here, although almost everything is molded on, including all but one of the tools, which I find to be a very interesting choice. I understand that this is a Tamiya kit. This is truly a weekend build. This is a beginner type kit. Although, why do we have the shovel off and not the rest of the tools? Those would be pretty easy things, I think, to leave off. Anyways, and easier to paint that whole thing. I have no problem with the gas and the water caps being, pre-molded. They're very, very crisp. But I don't know, a little bit interesting choice there. We get 2 of these sprues. The tracks, I think, are a mess. Link and length, same issue as the Jackson if you watch that review. The long lengths of track have no gap in between the tracks, which is not realistic. And then the singular lengths, as you wrap them around the sprocket, is going to pull the plastic because of the extra thin glue we use. It's going to pull that apart, and it's going to leave ugly holes and just a mess. And there's no real way around that that I can see. I've already made these tracks. I think you have to make them a mess, and you have to use putty to fill them. Anyways, not my favorite, but unfortunately, I don't have 48 scale rubber band tracks lying around, or else I would use those in a heartbeat. The running gear, the bogies here we get, have some pretty mean seam lines around this part that I'm showing you now. And that seam goes all the way around. It's a bigger seam than is on maybe any piece of this kit. So a lot of that sanding, the lower half of the hull ends up looking a little bit ugly. Nothing's uglier than sanded green plastic in the modeling world. So the bottom half is going to look a little bit rough. But the good news is our top half of the tank here. A beautiful upper hull, even if a lot was pre-molded, and a beautifully crisp turret here with all the mantlet and everything. The mantlet does get some cast texture. The turret does not. I'm not overly familiar with if you would have cast texture on a Firefly as opposed to other Shermans. I have not seen a Firefly in person, so someone can let me know in the comments that has seen one. We get a beautifully, this is one of the nicest molded barrels in any Tamiya kit. The seam is almost invisible. I can't get it to focus here, but you could not sand it if you wanted to, and it would be almost unnoticeable. So really, really impressive there. It's a 2-piece muzzle brake that was all slide molded. We get a couple poly caps, so the sprockets are going to move. That will help us put on the tracks, of course. And then also for the gun, we'll be able to rotate it up and down. Couple screws, looks like they gave us an extra, I believe, to attach the lower to the upper hull, which I really, really like, especially if you're, going to paint things separately. Really, really nice. The decals, or decals we should call them, because it's a British kit. Classic Tamiya, very thick, excessive carrier film. They're small because it's a small kit, so I think we'll be fine here. And there's at least not a lot of them. I do really, really love, not that it speaks to their specific decals, but the marking options they chose. The yellow on green always looks awesome, in my opinion. It's one of my favorite, combinations, if you will, for those things to go. So they could be better. You could cut the numbers or letters out individually if you wanted. I'm not going to go that far. We'll just see how well we can use them. But really nice kit. 4 sprues plus a die-cast hull. 9 steps. Really one main color here. Although you could get really creative with, shading and pre-shading, post-shading, all that stuff. Or like what we'll do is probably just get a rattle can and give it a quick spray of, British dark green and be done with it. Because this is truly a kind of beginner/weekend build in my eyes. And it's a beautiful subject for that. I've already finished the build as I'm recording this, and it looks spectacular when it's done. I don't know if that's just because I'm partial to the Firefly. The bottom half, again, if you looked at it closely, it's a little bit messy. Again, green plastic with a sanding stick is not a good combo. But the upper hull and the turret looks awesome. Now that I've got it primed and everything, it looks even better. So not only is it a good kit, but it'll, for a beginner or weekend, it's going to end up looking really, really nice when we're done with it. My only complaints, really are the tracks. That's the biggest complaint. And then they could have maybe given us 20 extra pieces. I'm not talking about making us a 1,000-piece kit, but take those 5 or 6 tools off. You know, you give us something small like a grab handle, you can take the tools off, right? We can put those on. It just makes the detail better. But that's my review of the kit. It looks beautiful. It is beautiful. It just has the kind of typical Tamiya flaws. If you've made it up to this point, I would obviously thank you for watching. If you haven't already, I'd please ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. Coming up next, at least in here for the Firefly in this series, we will be doing the build. This will be a 2-part. Part number 1 being the main build and assembly. Part number 2 being the painting and weathering. And we'll be doing that painting without an airbrush, kind of a beginner-friendly build here. So that wraps this up. Again, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you on the build video.